Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Uncensored Critic podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Thank you very much indeed. It means the world to me. Today, we welcome along a director and someone who has got experience in all different areas of this job. And let's just take a moment to introduce the great Alex Mill. If anyone who is not familiar with Alex's work, let's take a moment now. Alex trained at Central and got a diploma in filmmaking. She's worked as a first AD, second AD, intimacy coordinator, and a floor runner with over 11 years experience. She's also a mindful intimacy consultant, a writer and director for Encrypt Eternity for the past 13 years. That's her production company. A story ambassador for the Open World Alliance, production assistant for the Richard Gold Media, producer of a number of short films, and one in particular which we actually worked on together, which was A Path to Ecstasy, directed by the great Abdullah Khan in Guildford with Mike Jibson and Louie, Serkis, son of Andy. Also, previous experience with Russian arms and tracking cranes, drones, underwater filming, and fire stunts and Keylontic science. To hear more from her via her Patreon and Instagram, links are down below in the description for you to know much, much more. But in the meantime, Alex, hello.
Hello, you
Right.
did your research.
No, it's fascinating. What just like you're not only a director, but you know how to track cranes, drones, underwater filming, fire stunts, and everything. There's so much more to that.
Not as the person operating the cranes. I know the technical side. Well, I know the logistics side from an AD perspective, but yeah,
Okay.
I've been around the block and I worked a lot with those things.
Yeah, great. We'll definitely come on to that later. But we start at the beginning. So for you, Alex, where did it come from? The love of the arts and directing. Where did it all start for you?
I genuinely think just watching relationships on film, I famously have a very interesting relationship with my parents, and I think watching different relationships growing up in a very small town with very small-minded people, that was my window into the rest of the world. Those stories, even though they were, by all means, I'm not a highbrow film nerd. I watch anything and everything, and I just look for chemistry between people on film. And I
Yeah.
think that's what got me interested in the whole world. And obviously, as someone who's just watching it, I was not really aware of the jobs behind camera. And as soon as I got to know that, oh, there are millions of roles that you can slot into and you can find your preferences, that's when I started to specify.
Yeah. Was there one film in particular which really, really captured your imagination, or you thought like that was the moment where it clicked for you, like, yeah, I want to be a filmmaker?
See, not in childhood. It came a little bit later. I did, and to be fair, like this was one of those early loves. It's like you never forget your first love, but you kind of outgrow it.
Mm,
And I remember at the end of Inception, my friend and I
mm,
walked out of the movie theater and we sat. It was in one of those shopping centers, and we sat in the middle of the shopping center on a bench, and like
hmm.
for like 15 minutes, we didn't talk to each other. We were just like I was absolutely just I had this like very visceral feeling of just because I went through a 2 hour movie experience, I'm never going to be the same person again. There was a
Mm.
transformation, an internal transformation. But then, later on you refine your taste in film, and now I have very obscure films that I like that nobody has ever heard before that are my inspirations.
Mm. Yeah, it's almost like, you look at, it's funny you mentioned Inception there. That was one of those films that even I walked out of, and I just thought, what? Well, first of all, like Christopher Nolan is a genius. There's no doubt about it. And the time lapses, everything that followed, just and you walked out literally just like, what? Like, yeah, I think I've got it. I think I understood what that was all about. But yeah, there's that brilliant scene towards the end and the music and everything. Was it specifically the relationship that DiCaprio's character had with his kids that was particularly engaging with you?
A little bit of that. I do enjoy watching characters who regret their choices and who are grappling with their own character, your own character flaws, and those are the things that are like very visibly holding you back. But you being a human being, you just cannot get through them properly. And that was one of those films. It's like, are you making the right choices in life, and are you compelled to make the choices that you're making? And then the whole
Mm,
idea of people being able to very fundamentally influence each other,
mm.
that really clicks in. Plus a little time travel is always fun.
When Christopher Nolan does time travel, it plays with your mind, and in a good way, in a very good way. He's a genius. So your role as first AD, I've had a few people on the show talking about this role and everything, and whilst the job is the same on paper, everyone has a unique experience. So, what was in your experience? What's it like being a first AD?
I was trained by commercial first ADs, male, stereotypical middle-aged guys, white dudes. And I had a very different impression of what a first AD is. And I remember in the beginning saying to myself that maybe I'm going to stay within the AD realm, but I never really want to make it into firsting. And just by the nature of this industry, I had a very interesting career when I actually did start firsting and running at the same time on very small jobs and slightly bigger jobs. And then after a while, the running was just, it became just the day job, the stuff that actually pays the bills. But I started firsting on bigger and bigger stuff, and I started recognizing my own style and finding my own voice in it. And I had a massive shift when I moved away, and then the pandemic came, and I was still away, just out of the country. And when I came back, I didn't want to come back to myself. I didn't want to come back to the ways that I was doing things before. And the second job that I did when I came back was a job that fundamentally shifted the way I look at the industry and my role in it and ADing itself. I found a much more softer way of communication, because ADing as a job is purely communication based. And some people are coming into a communication job with, this is me, this is my personality. I have a preconceived notion of what the job role is and what this film is and what the project is and what am I supposed to be doing. And I don't really deviate from that role. While uh, I pride myself on it. That's the aspect of the job that I enjoy, of every single chemistry meet, every single constellation of a new group of people is completely different from the previous ones.
Mm,
So there's a basic skill set, there's a basic toolkit that I gather on different jobs. And the most useful tool out of all of those is being able to adapt to people's communication styles, people's
mm,
personal pace, their vocabulary, their culture, their worldview, their understanding. And it's a live, ever-changing puzzle that just because we have something planned on paper, so many things are going wrong on the day. And you do need to have the ability to think on your feet and keep that, probably assertive is the best word for it, keep that assertive atmosphere that we are going together someplace. That place might change, the direction might shift, we might deviate from the original plan, but we still have to go together. And that's one of the AD's jobs, is that cohesion, creating that going together in the same direction.
yeah. There's a word you mentioned there was chemistry meet, which I thought I never heard of until
Yeah.
I came across your work. But and I just thought that's really important because a lot of this business is, a huge factor is working with people who you actually like, who you actually enjoy talking to and working on a daily basis with. So that's as fundamental, I think, as not only just make sure you've got the funding, it's a good story, it's a good script, but good people involved as well. Like that's so important, isn't it?
It's, the industry has changed a lot in the past 10 years. I started out feeling like an outsider from many perspectives, from not being from this country, from, being a female, being a slightly younger female than the others around me.
Mm,
And I slowly and gradually grew into a place in my life where I feel more comfortable and I feel okay with saying yes to jobs that I actually really stand behind and saying no to the things, usually purely because of the people that I'm like, I just don't think that I'm the right fit for it. You know,
Mm.
I just don't think that I would like to work with you. I hardly suggest that you don't want to work with me. And that's perfectly fine. While in the
Yeah.
beginning you're hungry and poor and you just need a job. And by this point I have the luxury of, or at least a little bit more freedom
Mm.
in picking and choosing the environment itself as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned about how you've worked with quite some directors who you didn't. No, sorry, excuse me. You've worked with some directors who you didn't enjoy a lot of the time, and that's obviously you've worked with people you have liked as well. But it seems to me like you said consistently, then as one would like, the directors are usually come in, and then people you don't usually like working with. But producer wise, you've always got on with the producer, and
Yeah, that's a funny thing. Yeah, I've
yeah.
never had a producer relationship where the producer didn't like me, but I had a few directors where we just didn't get along.
Yeah, I mean that's perfectly understandable. But so that sort of brings me on to my next point, which is how do you work with producers? How does the directing team work with the producers?
Um, Everyone has their own style. Funny enough, every single film, no matter the scale, is slightly different because of the people. It's like the people are the real ingredients. And when you mix and match those different ingredients, it's slightly different every time. Like a dish, it just comes out slightly different every single time. And the way I like to work is extremely collaborative. And I very much enjoy when we can think on our feet. I highly appreciate preparation,
Mm,
but I also see that there is a lot of bureaucracy going on in film that is hindering a lot of creativity. And like I perfectly understand that the more you scale up, the more legal stuff and logistical stuff you have to deal with, but that's not necessarily the part that I enjoy. I have a certain skill set for it, and I think that's what producers appreciate in me, that I look at the creative side with a very strong foundation in the logistics, whether it's feasible, how it is feasible, whether it's safe, whether we can do it in the allocated amount of time within the budget. Like I don't I think those were my biggest clashes with directors, when people don't necessarily have a sense of reality. They're not
mm,
grounded in reality,
mm-hmm,
and they very frequently make people work beyond their boundaries,
mm-hmm.
and they justify that boundary violation with creativity or vision. And to me, that's just a petulant child
Yeah,
who's never learned what reality looks like.
yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Some people can just feel like because they are at the top of the tree, so to speak, they can do that. They can just treat the area as they want, and it takes guts for someone to say, "No, you're treating me like shit. We're a team here. It's not all about yourself." And that's a good actually. The person who recommended that I get in touch with you actually. So shout out to Amanda. Was She talked about how you've looked at specifically because I know you've worked as a runner as well,
Mm.
and just how much shit runners have to put up with. And I know there's even Richard E. Grant actually, his daughter was a runner for a long time, and he's actually done public interviews talking about how shit they are treated. And there's articles saying that some people were screamed at because their cup of tea wasn't hot enough, or their sides weren't printed on the right bit of paper, or something like ludicrous like that. What was your experience of being a runner, and what can we do to sort of improve how they're treated?
I I honestly I might have just blocked out the worst horror stories.
Mm,
I don't, or maybe I just got very lucky in terms of I've never really been publicly humiliated or shamed,
mm,
which I think is the worst. When
Yeah.
People are, it's just everybody just take a big step back and look at a situation when a human being is shouting at another human being for no good reason,
Mm,
apart from they wanted something and it didn't manifest immediately. Like, hold your horses.
hmm.
But I do, so I experienced a lot more subtle form of just being looked down upon just because of a job title. And the funny thing is that, especially in advertising where I started, sometimes I was older or the same age as the creatives, as the
Yeah.
agency creatives, or as the grown-ups. And it's just the most bizarre thing when you have to physically serve other people. Like I appreciate that film can be extremely grueling, and the core team will always be staying next to camera pretty much for the entire day. Like I had a shoot when we were shooting underground, and I realized that like literally I hardly ever came out of that underground little thing for a week.
Mm.
It's like, you step out to pee once or twice a day. And everybody else is taking their little breaks, and I need just to step out for a second. And I'm just like, I'm just there with camera for the entire day.
Mm.
And so I appreciate when it's somebody's dedicated job to feed you and bring you teas and coffees and make sure that the periphery of the set is well maintained. But I just don't appreciate when runners come in all sizes. Sometimes they are 17-year-olds, just came out of uni,
Yep.
have no life experience. This is their first job ever. Sometimes you see people in their 30s still being runners because they want to get into the industry and they want to have the first experience and the first job that you get as a runner. And I just find it very bizarre that just because a job title, we start treating people in a certain way that is very often demeaning, disrespectful. It's just not okay to treat another human being just because their title is supposedly beneath you
Absolutely.
in in a way that is just not humane.
Mm. Yeah, it's a big thing. We talk about essays and runners,
Yeah.
just and I've had a few experiences of being a essay or supporting artist, and you're literally. I did a shoot for EastEnders once, and your call time was 6 a.m. So you get to Elstree Studios at 6 a.m. And I think it was just like February or early March time or something. It's freezing cold, and
Yeah.
then you get there, and you're literally showed in through the gate, and then they put us literally in a dark room, like by the set, literally with a little bit of lighting up there, no Wi-Fi, literally just in the corner, so you couldn't really do much on your phone without your battery just being drained by all the data you were using.
Yeah.
And you just sat there, and you just thought, okay, so what now? It literally kept us in this dark, cold room, and we were called maybe once every hour. And luckily, I think we finished about 12, so we weren't there all day. But
Yeah.
you literally just like, hang on a sec, is this worth it? And of course, the answer is no. But obviously, if you enjoy it, I know some people who are supporting artists in their 50s, 60s, and 70s actually, so then they love it, and it was like, yeah, go for it. But if you want to be like, and also the group I worked with, I did a shoot in Birmingham with a lot of essays, and
Mm.
the agency they were, they really, really looked after them, and that's
Mhm.
what I got anyway. But it's just how important it is just to look after everyone, everybody in this thing, because you're a team here. So I suppose like that's a good lead on to so it's a very typical kind of question for these sort of things. But so if you're the first AD for a job, what is a day in the life of a first AD?
Mm. I'm trying to look for something like extremely typical. Is it not the first day of the shoot, or is it the first day of the shoot?
Let's go. Yeah, let's do it in three parts actually. Let's do the
There you
first
go.
day, middle of the shoot, and the last day.
Okay. So first day, weirdly, so half of the people have never been there before,
Hmm.
never done a recce, never landed there, haven't opened the trucks, don't know what's what. We're literally, depending on the size of the project, whether we're cramming in a corner of a room and that's your production office, or whether you have the trucks and you're setting up. first day, no matter what, is always at least a half a day is just spent with setting up, figuring stuff out, finding your way around the location. Is just making sure a huge part of the AD's job is making sure that I answer as many questions as possible because I've been on prep, I've been on the recce's, I probably know more than a lot of other departments. And a lot of people were asking me questions that are just like very basic questions. Where is this? Where is that? What does that belong to? Things
Yeah.
like that. So a first day is almost like a little introduction of just like, here is this and there is that, and that's what we're doing today. And it sets the tone for the entire shoot. So the way you talk to people, the pace that you're hitting. Like I remember there was a shoot once where I've never done that ever since, where we did 13 pages on the first day. It was a very easy, very simple setup. It was just on green. But still, that pace set the tone for the rest of the shoot.
Mm,
And when we were doing 5 pages, 6 pages days, we were like, we did 13 before. Like, why are we doing five when that's
mm,
totally normal? So
mm,
it's like the first day's job in everybody's mind is the first impression of what this is. It's like a relationship. The first time you meet, you kind of suss each other out, and that first imprint is going to be the baseline for everything else that you're measuring too. So
mm,
the first day is about setting that baseline. Then somewhere in the middle of the shoot is it's all about making sure that people are still engaged because tiredness kicks in and personal misunderstanding and conflicts kick in and we missed a couple of deadlines and we dropped a couple of scenes and we stood in the rain and mud and it's been grueling. So being able to keep the momentum is hugely dependent on the ADs because we are the voice of the set, we are the glue, we are the people who make sure that everybody is doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing at the time that they're supposed to be doing it. So it's a
mm,
very interesting managerial role. And if we would be bossy, if we would be giving off the vibe that I don't care about you, just do the job,
mm.
and that immediately shuts people down and immediately communicates that, oh, I'm not respected. It's
Yeah.
just the job.
Yeah.
So
It's a
I
bad
like
vibe. Yeah.
doing that. I like as a second AD, I think that's one of my favorite parts of the job is listening to people's grievances. It's like it's a huge part of the job to
Mm,
go off in a corner and you just I'm just here to listen to your vent. Please.
mm,
That's what I'm here for. And I like that aspect of the job. And then towards the end, it's everybody is planning the rep party, everybody's mind is on the next job, everybody is super exhausted, and we're
mm,
more, honestly, I guess is how it happens. We're more accident prone and we're more prone to snapping or just being like unusually impatient with each other. So during the end, I really enjoy being more personal than ever before. If we haven't had any team bonding, if we never went out and spent a night together or something,
mm,
this is the time when more personal conversations come into the picture. Funny enough, that it's, on every film set, you're never that busy because people are working at different times and there's always something that we're waiting for. So there's always a moment for actually talking to people. So funny enough, I spend more time just talking to people towards the end
mm,
because sometimes that's what you need. We're so people powered that sometimes the thing that you get your energy from is to be able to say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. This is what's going on in my life. This is how I feel about the job. This is what's going on outside the job. And that kind of re-energizes people and refocuses people.
yeah. It's about setting the, you want to keep the energy and the vibes high from day one. I know it's easier said than done, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that goes on, cameras and stuff. I remember shooting a short film and our SD card, which is like the memory thing, which keeps all your shots and footage, everything there. just decided that it wanted just to fuck up right in the middle of the day, and we lost all the material that we had that day. And it was, yeah, it was a bit of a challenge. I remember going back into the edit and just seeing what we had and all these files, but it was just a black screen, and then you opened it up and it was just a dark screen and white noise. And
Mm,
I thought, oh my God, so we're gonna have to shoot again. We're gonna have to get it all
yeah.
back. But luckily, we reshot it and we managed to get the film together, so that was good. But yeah, it's interesting about set because sets are so busy all the time. There's always something happening all the time, and if you start great, then fantastic. But like, what's it like on a day when the energy is low, or your stuff? It's one of those days where just anything, something's not going right. And so, how do you pick yourself up first, and then the rest of the team up on the days when you're just like, oh, please God, let this day end. Please let's start again
Yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah. And it happens. It happens at every single job to every single person.
Mm,
I I'm hugely people powered, so
mm,
um I gain energy from having a human connection with someone.
mm,
So then I really enjoy when I get to bring my team with me, because then I get a huge amount of energy just
yeah.
from them being around me, and just from them. Like, we support each other through anything, and they're just absolutely wonderful. They are my little film family. And to be able to do that for other people, the same way as with communication, I really enjoy finding out the nuances of somebody else's communication style and then adapting myself to it. So the same way I enjoy like somehow sussing out or figuring out or intuiting what the other person needs in the moment. Some people genuinely benefit from take five. We're
Mm,
going to step away. You have your space, because some people get a bit overwhelmed and they don't think well under pressure, or they start making mistakes, or they start making snap decisions that are actually not beneficial. And I'm just like, we're here. It takes an extra 5 seconds to shoot this now. We're not gonna fix it in post. It's not gonna happen. You know
mm.
how that works.
We have to fix it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just take a breather. It's absolutely fine. We're gonna figure this out. So I think keeping that, at least that's how I look at it, that the film is not made yet. Just because there is a version of it in somebody's head, that's never exactly going to be the version that's going to manifest itself.
Mm,
So I like pulling people out of their shells. It happens a lot with creatives, with designers, with HODs. And
mm,
I just like cracking that shell of just stay present. This is what's happening now. That piece of equipment broke down, that actor got sick, that rain cover didn't work, whatever. This is what we're dealing with now. Look at what's in front of yourself. It's like a
mm.
mindfulness exercise. Just like refocus your energy instead of ruminating and going into your head about, but that's not how I want it. It's like, tough life. This is what's in front of you. Let's make the best out of this. So on days when things just don't go well and things are just not moving in the right direction, I just I keep an energy that just communicates that, look, we're gonna deal with this.
Mm.
We're gonna figure out how, we're gonna do it together, and we're gonna make it happen.
Simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a really good lesson in how you've just got to keep um like pushing forward and pushing forward. I don't know if you ever had this experience where like you've had a tricky day on set, but you just keep going and going and going. Right, we'll get it. Right, we got it. Right, done, finished. And then you're just the adrenaline is going all the time. And then a couple of days later, you sort of look back, or maybe you get to the ends, like you're in post and you're editing or color grading that scene, and you remember thinking like, oh, do you remember that day when we shot that scene, or nothing was going right, but we managed to do it. But did you ever have that moment where you look back on that scene or that a day or a moment and you think, how how did we get through that? Seriously, how did we do that? And but then obviously at the time you're not really thinking that, but you just get on with it. Then you look back and think, how the hell did we do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did we do that? Have you ever had that experience?
It's absolutely magical. Like it happens to me so many times, like an hour, half an hour before we do anything in the very beginning of the day, when I look at stuff and I'm just like, nothing is ready. Like literally nothing is ready. We're supposed to be doing something here in half an hour. And it's an absolutely magical thing for me still. How things just fall in line. And when people know individually what they were supposed to be doing, somehow they manage to actually bring it together.
Mm,
It's bizarre and otherworldly, but it does happen. And the same thing with conflict resolution or crisis management, that we somehow figure it out. We
yeah.
just, when I think a set loses focus when the individuals stop caring about what we're doing. So I think a huge part of my job is to rekindle that care
Mm,
because that's what motivates all of us.
mm,
And the how did we get through it is usually down to people not giving up and still caring. And those people who still care just kind of pull it through.
mm. Yeah, it's a tricky thing because you want to get everything right. You just want a day where everything's just working. Is the camera working? Yes. Is that prop there? Yes. But you just ask for one day where everything runs smoothly. But it is worth it, I think, because then when you watch that final product and you're really happy with it, and despite everything all the struggles you went through to get to that final point, you think, yeah, it was worth it. But I think as a kind of a mixed bag, really, because you're like, yeah, that was worth it. But I'm never working with him again. I'm never working with her again. I'm never doing anything with that person again. But I don't know, it's kind of conflicting emotions. Is that something that you've experienced?
Sometimes happens. Yeah, sometimes happens. That's
Mm,
I think I reached that point of my career when I think my next career move is not to get bigger and bigger jobs in the same job title because it doesn't necessarily come with more freedom.
mm,
And freedom being one of my personal highest values.
mm,
I'm looking for an upgrade in job title so that I get to have more influence over the actual environment that I'm working in. Because some people's chemistry works well, and some people just don't get along with each other.
yeah.
And they don't have to. Just because you have the credit list, it doesn't necessarily mean that you and I are actually working well together.
Mm, yeah.
So I would love to make it to that stage in my life and in my career when I actually get to choose the people that I'm working with on every level, so that it's not just the right person for the job, but it's also the right person for this environment and for this team.
Mm,
Because those are absolutely beautiful experiences. Like every job has, I don't know how, but at least one person who's just not cooperating well with the rest.
mm.
But when the majority of people are just genuinely pulling together and genuinely caring about each other, those are such fun experiences.
So life on set, there's a lot of waiting around, particularly for people, people like casts, I think more specifically. But in the times what's it like when you're like for directors during those quiet times, you're literally just planning, or setting up stuff. Like what's it like when you don't need the cast?
When we don't need the cast, those are the
Yeah.
times when we are usually busy.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's why the cast is waiting around because we are doing something. But there are times when we are waiting for a cast, when we're waiting for somebody to change or get ready. Times when we're waiting, so times when a director is waiting, those are actually quite precious moments, and usually somebody will steal their attention to have a question and to talk through something and to review footage or go through the next day or have questions about this thing that's coming up in a week or have a production meeting, just an impromptu thing, or have a fucking recce. So times when the director is waiting are usually not spent with doing nothing. There are very few precious moments when the director is able to step away and have a moment for themselves. They're usually bombarded with questions all day, every day.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it's ultimately it's just about just keeping on top of things and everything, and just being like as open as you can, not only for the work but also with each other. Um, I suppose I've got a question for today, which was out of all the experiences you've had, and I think this will help, but what's the secret to making like the best set possible?
Mm. I would say people, but choosing people strategically from two different perspectives. So, film sets are modeled after a military structure, and that's why the hierarchy, that's why the language.
Mm,
And uh, the military has operations. It has a lot of drills, it has a lot of preparation, but eventually what they're trying to do is they're trying to put together an operation.
hmm
It's something similar with film. We are like mobile cities. We set up base camp somewhere, sometimes in the middle of nowhere, take over a location or build a location, and basically build a functioning infrastructure of a small city or a small town out of nothing and then break it down back into nothing. So I believe the success of a project is hinged upon building a team where every single job role is well catered for,
mm,
to build that infrastructure, to operate that infrastructure, to move that infrastructure further forward.
hmm
And at the same time, not just the right person for the right job, but people who actually work well together. Because film is highly collaborative, even though there's very often it's not a divide, but just a mutual respect between departments. It's like you don't touch my thing, I don't touch your thing. It's like
mm,
that kind of understanding of our individuations. And at the same time, those individual specific job roles need to work well together as well. My department cannot be more important than your department. Your job role cannot overtake everybody else's time. So we have to appreciate that we're all working together on something. Nobody is more important than the other. And at the same time, we all have to fit into each specific job role that keeps the whole thing functioning, including logistical jobs, including the shitty jobs, including the jobs that are unthankful and take longer hours than everything else. Those are the things that keep a mini society functioning.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a lead on to another section I want to talk to today. I've been through like your work and your Instagram page and everything, and you're a huge advocate for mental health and making sure that you are looking after not only yourself, but giving other advice to other people to, know their worth and just know that you are enough and all that stuff. But one thing that was really interesting was that you've got these kind of series on Instagrams. You've got a series of reels, like 15, 20-minute videos, and you talk about everything. You've got series called like the 4 stages of relationships, the boundary violation series, when people sort of go too far with spatial, vocal, physical, emotional, even sexual, spiritual, time, or financial boundaries that are violated in some way. So let's sort of talk about a bit more about that. So how important are people setting boundaries? Because boundaries isn't something that I've learned. It's incredibly important, particularly
Mm.
around some people you don't really want to be around for too long. But how important is it from your perspective, that boundary? How important are boundaries?
I was 27, 29 when something like that, when I understood what a boundary is.
Mm,
I personally grew up in a very enmeshed environment. I did not understand the concept of boundaries. A part of me always thought that that's too cold. I don't want to be away from people. I don't want to separate myself from people. And you can hear it, funny enough, it came up as a very interesting response to Me Too from the male side of like, well, now I cannot do anything anymore. And now I'm scared to do what I used to be doing, even though
Mm,
it's not with a bad intent, but just being a bit more friendly or a bit more tactile. And now I'm just afraid to be myself. So there's that explanation or that interpretation behind boundaries of like they separate people and they create a divide and they are not enabling connection.
mm,
And then I rephrased boundaries in my mind in terms of we are all autonomous human creatures. None of us grew up in perfect environments. We all got trauma imprints somewhere, usually in our subconscious psyche. And those are the patterns that are playing out as repetitive compulsive behaviors and addictions and relationship problems and conflicts just in general in
mm.
life.
Yeah.
Those are all coming from internal issues. So for me, in social settings, being able to have clear boundaries is preventing to get too enmeshed with each other and to get too enmeshed in each other's lives and issues and problems. Just because I have a bad day, it doesn't mean that I have to ruin everybody else's day.
Mm,
I can pull a boundary around myself and I can assert my boundaries as well that I need a little bit more time today. I need to step away for a while. I'm angry, but I don't want to take that out on you. Or I feel low on energy, but I don't want to suck away from you. It's my responsibility to take care of myself and to bring myself back into harmony.
mm,
So boundaries can be interpreted in that way as well, that it's mutual respect, it's self-respect, and I'm also responsible for my boundaries to be understanding what my capacity is and what my level of focus is and level of commitment is, because sometimes it's waning, sometimes I'm not 1,000,000% committed to the job or to this day because we're humans. Like I have a bad day and I have low points and I have moments and I'm just like, this is just a cash cow. Like, let's be honest.
mm,
And and when we establish boundaries, I still think that we are at the infancy of understanding the human psyche.
mm.
And so it very often goes towards the other end, which can be very alienating for people when we're too rigid about boundary settings and we're too formulaic and we're following instructions and we're following a set of guidelines and we're
Yeah.
ticking boxes and checking bullet points and doing the paperwork and the bureaucracy behind it, but the actual day-to-day experience is still very disrespectful or still very abusive.
Mm,
And it's an aspect of humanness, it's an aspect of communication that is extremely subtle.
mm,
And that's the part that I enjoy. And I'm definitely not at the end of my journey, but I use what I have to build on the previous iterations, my previous versions, to be better than the person that I was yesterday and 10 years ago.
mm,
And for me, even setting boundaries around myself to not spill over into someone else's life, that was a huge thing. And then the other way around as well, that this is genuinely your issue, your problem, with no disrespect. Everyone needs to have a sense of agency and self-governance. And a lot of people have not gone through psychological maturation and they're still living with their parents and relying on their parents and looking at the rest of the world as their parents
mm.
and going out into the world with huge expectations
Yeah.
and not understanding that self-governance, that you have to be able to take care of yourself because you're nobody else's child and it's not their job to take care of you whether that's financially or emotionally or physically, or bringing your vision to life at the expense of their lives.
Mm.
So for me, that's what boundaries are all about. And it's not the formulaic consent and everything.
Yeah, no, and very well put. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of people, it feels like a sort of a kind of a tick list, or like a set of instructions that you have to obey in life. You go to school,
Yeah.
you do your exams, you go to university, you leave university, you get a job, you then keep that job, you might get promoted, you make a decent amount of money, six figures every year. You meet someone, you have a family, you do that job for the next 50, 60 years, you retire and you die. And that is what is called a good life. That is how life should
Yeah.
be lived. And it's like, is it? So you spend 50 years doing something that you don't really like doing, just to
Yeah.
put food on the table, and in other words, just to make money. And yet, for some reason, you want to put people through a life where they're not happy. They do the same thing day in, day out for a good majority of their life. And at the end of it, they sort of sit back and go, what was it all about? What was it all about? Why didn't I say yes to what I actually wanted to do, what actually my gut was telling me, what actually made me happy? And I kind of realized that quite early on. I used to see a lot of people who just did all these big corporate jobs, and I just thought they're not happy.
Yeah.
They're not. Well, obviously, if that was your passion and then you are fighting for it and that does make you happy, great, fantastic. It makes
Yeah.
you happy. But there's a lot of stuff. I remember thinking, like, there is no one way to live a life and everything. And there's a great phrase actually I heard. It's tough, but it's very true, which is to say, only you can help yourself. No one, and there's another one, no one's coming to save you. Obviously you've got people around you all the time, you've great friends, great family, cool. But at the end of the day, you're the one in the driver's seat. You're the one who is pushing forward every day just to make up for stuff. And, well, not make up for stuff, make up from previous errors that you've done, but you forgive yourself, you move on, and you just make stuff up. You make the connections again, and not make stuff up, know where that came from. But yeah, it's a brilliant way of looking at it. And so one thing another thing I got from your stuff actually was, it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you want people to feel like whole, complete, and want to contribute to what they love doing. You're not out for anyone. You are completely supportive to one another all the time. Is that? I mean, that's what I got in summary from your work. Would that be a fair point?
I think it's for me at least, it's a worthy goal. You know, you can put people in the same circumstances and their experience would be very different. It
Mm,
happens a lot with siblings. They grow up in the same household. It happens a lot with twins. They are even genetically so close to each other that they're almost the same person,
mm,
and they have very different internal experiences. So being whole and complete is a total subjective internal experience. And we set goals such as I want to be rich and famous, and I want to have this and that, and I want to have the worldly means, and I want to have the partner, I want to have this bucket list. And even when people tick those boxes, they might not necessarily have the experience of this actually was fulfilling, or in the moment, this is fulfilling. So as a person, that's what I'm looking for, is how can I feel good in my life, in my body, in myself? How can I live with myself in a way that I enjoy it? Not for
mm,
someone else, not for show, not for Instagram. It's just for me, that my experience of my life is something that I want to participate in.
mm. Is there something that you've noticed very recently that you feel like isn't being talked about enough, or should be talked more about? Well, of something that you've noticed quite recently.
I think it's we have a huge generational history of things like that, the finer things in life just not being in the forefront. 20 years ago, our parents' generation did not, I don't want to say they didn't care about these things. Sometimes they weren't even aware of these things.
Mm.
Mental health is such a new thing that we talk about publicly and
Yeah.
openly.
Mm.
And nobody knows because it's never going to be part of the history books how people actually thought previously. But from our deduction, even from the previous generation and seeing that generational gap, that sometimes we just don't speak the language and we just don't understand each other because they don't necessarily have the concept of what we're talking about.
Mm.
I can only deduct that it was even worse in the previous generations, that mental health was just not even a consideration. It was just something that you just suck it up and
Mm.
power through it, or you just completely break down and live a life kind of on the verges of society.
Mm.
And now we're the same way with you. It's you started to have the question of like, is this really worth it? Do
Mm.
I really want to live like that? Those are, I think, they are very new questions in the majority of people's minds. There were always people through society, usually artists or more artistic people who had those questions, or philosophers who were challenging things, but they were usually people quite well off. They had the
Mm.
means to just sit around for the whole day and think and write and paint. And the majority of society was busy with just making a living and making food and surviving. So those were the rough and tumble people, just the tough ones who are just like, well, this is life. These are the cards that I was dealt. This is what I was given. And I just have to power through it.
Mm.
And I think this is something that our generation, and especially the generation after us, is very much standing up against. It's this quality of life of, am I surviving and plowing through things that I don't want to, or do I have any agency over creating a life that I actually like?
Mm. It's interesting, really, really interesting. Yeah, and ultimately, I feel like if you want to be happy, and like happiness, I feel like is the most important thing in everything that we do. Just make sure that you are happy
Yeah.
in yourself, and you know, there are this, just the joy of doing something that you love doing makes a heck of a lot of difference
Yeah.
to everything. And yeah, I was just wondering if there was ever a time where you would like you're watching a final cut of your film or something, or you walking home or traveling back from set one day thinking, yeah, there's a reason why I love this, and there's a reason why I do this job. Was there like ever a moment or moments, hopefully moments, there's many of them, that you just thought, yeah, this I did good today.
Yeah.
I'm happy today.
Yeah. Yeah. And funny enough, it always comes down to people. On this last job that I did, there was a guy who said to me that we as film people, we're just animals that don't fit into any other sector, any other industry. It's so true. We're not suited to any other field. That's why we're here, because we found something in this world and in this structure that suits our personalities. You
Mm.
know, it is long hours and it is grueling and it is bizarre and it is like we are playing. It's all just play pretend and make believe. We're
Yeah,
making stuff up.
yeah.
And there is something in our personalities that wouldn't be happy in any other job.
Mm.
That's why we're still here.
Mm.
So there are many of those moments, but they all come down to people. There are many of those moments where I'm like, I am in the right place and this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm.
And still, that doesn't mean that I agree with everything that's going on. And I would like to get to the point when I can actually create those environments that where people have a good experience of themselves, because we're all somewhere deep down inside, we're all artistic, creative people in every job title. And I like giving people the opportunity to play with that artistic expression and to be able to bring themselves into the job and not just be a hired in hand. And I would love to graduate or mature to that stage where I'm able to create those environments where people come in and they genuinely feel like that the job itself is feeding them. They are not just working for someone, they are getting something out of the job itself.
Mm. Yeah, hugely. And I think that sort of brings me on to we talked about before we came on about the nervous system.
Mm,
And one thing I've sort of heard actors talk about recently is how if you're if you're going through something on stage or on set or whatever, your body doesn't know that it's not real. You have to. I think we might have some like little words with ourselves, like first thing in the morning, particularly if it's like a really intense day or something. We just say, look, we're going to say a lot of things today. We're going to say some things that we don't normally say. We're going to do some things that are not usually what we would do, and we might raise our voices, but it's all just for the craft. This isn't real. And I'd like your body just give you a little signal going, got it, I've got you. But yeah, what have you uncovered in your research looking into the nervous system?
I have a very long history looking at this stuff. And it's something that happens quite often with people in film that they feel quite lost without the job because they haven't quite built a life outside of the job because the job itself is so consuming.
Mm,
And and I was just saying this to someone the other day that I'm very happy that I actually built quite a rich life outside of the industry so that I never feel that panic of I have to have a job because otherwise I don't find my self-definition. And a huge part of that outside life is um, not just mental health and emotional health, but the science behind it, the biology behind it, the neurochemistry behind it. So I in my personal life, I've been an absolute geek about this stuff,
mm,
and I studied very different modalities. My new favorite thing is German New Medicine, which is a very um, scientifically based, but also at the same time, it sounds very woo-woo because it's such
mm,
a new way of looking at the human being. But it's all based on brain scans, and it's literally physically the parts of your brain that light up with certain emotions is a direct indicator of a symptom or an illness that is going to follow that firing. And you can map certain brain territories to certain parts of your ailments and illnesses, whether that's a mental thing or whether it's a very physical thing. And so I like the very tangible mapping of what's happening in my body, and I like understanding what's happening with my psyche and my neurology because I have a history in depression and anxiety. And I just wanted to understand because for such a long time I felt like I'm not in control of myself and I'm a different person
mm,
when I go into those moods. And studying the actual biochemistry behind it helped me a lot with understanding how powerful the I want to say the mind, but it's not technically the mind. The mind body is one organism, and the same thing with self-suggestion or this relationship with yourself when you can say to yourself that I'm going to the person, I'm going to put the body through an experience that might not be pleasant.
yeah.
We have to put it in the right box, in the right setting, that you are not under threat I'm not putting you through a life-threatening situation or a fatal relationship conflict. You're not going to lose your partner. You're not going to lose your life. You're not going to kill someone. What we're doing here is we're playing out those things, and there's a separation. And that separation is a basis of for trauma healing as well. That it's and not exposure therapy. That's a very different thing, but it's the basis of many different modalities in trauma healing to be able to reframe and recalibrate perception and interpretation and the story behind the events.
Mm.
Because we're narrative creatures, and the way we look at life is through story. So we look at our individual experiences and we make up our personal story about it. And unless that story changes, we keep repeating the same elements and we keep recreating the same story beats just so that we have a corrective experience, just so that we have a different ending to the story. But we can get stuck in a loop, in a cycle. And that's the part of the psyche that I really enjoy thinking about and talking about and reading about, and I really geek out about it.
Yeah. How do we break that cycle?
Different things click for different people. I tried many different things. A huge part of it has to be some kind of a physical change, some kind of a physical resolution. If it is with a person, usually our problems are relationship problems, relationship-based problems. So it's usually hugely healing when someone can have a corrective experience, not necessarily within the relationship where the wound or the break happened, but in a similar setting. So if we have an issue with a mother or a father, we seek out mother figures and father figures later in life, maybe even in relationships or as a boss or in settings where we get to experience those same feelings. And if we go into that consciously, we can actually change the unfinished business. We can finish the unfinished business.
Mm.
And different ways work for different people. Some people appreciate different forms of therapy. I found something called family constellations, which really helped me. That was a very tangible way of actually feeling feelings. But different things work for a different approach. Some people are very physically oriented. Some people really enjoy talk therapy. It's just a different way of looking at the same animal.
Mm. I suppose you've had quite a few people reach out to you probably with questions and people saying like, how do I sort of get over this barrier? How do I get through this? How do I get through that? What would you say was like some of the most frequently asked questions of yourself, or the ones that, or yeah, the questions that you get more often than others?
Mm. Funny enough, it has to do with relationships.
Mm.
I think that's why during COVID, when I didn't know what to do and the whole industry was shutting down, I went into the field of relationships because that's what I've been doing in my personal life for years,
Mm.
especially with males. I really enjoy working with males that mostly everyone, whether they are in a relationship or not, complain about the lack of a relationship or about the relationship they are in. And no matter how we are, you know, some people are absolutely hell bent on their career and they really want to make it and they would make it all by themselves and they don't really care about anything else but business.
Mm.
Usually, especially towards, I don't want to say towards the end of their lives, that's not true. When you have that success or when you've achieved what you wanted to achieve or when you're on the right track, people usually start looking towards relationships.
Mm.
And that's where the issues are. Some people run away from those relationships because of their own personal history. But the most frequent questions are around how can I make this work? Why doesn't it work? It's all about interpersonal relationships, mostly romantic.
Mm. So what? And that's another thing that you've talked about as well, the four stages of a relationship. And there's one word in here which I didn't know existed until I read your stuff. And it's the last one. So the four stages are dependence, counterdependence, independence, and interdependence. Now,
Mm.
and and I think I've consumed that other one. It's all the same. So yeah, interdependence. What is that?
Was that the new thing? So funny. For me, counter dependence was like the mind-blowing thing.
Yeah.
So
Well, we'll talk about that next. We'll talk about that next.
interdependence. What I appreciated about that categorization is exactly the fourth one, the second one, but the fourth edition, because a lot of relationship experts, I'm tentative to use that word, but a lot of people in the field of relationships, they categorize the same thing of a period of dependency, a period of independence, and a period of interdependence. So in they are correlating to a baby's developmental stages as well. So it's a lot easier to explain with those developmental stages. But usually those stages repeat in relationships as well. That at a stage of dependency, that's the honeymoon phase when we are against the world and it's all about us and we're so closely linked that we're almost enmeshed. It's the stage of development where a baby is physically dependent on their mom, their parents, because they're not fully in control of their own state. Now, it's with a baby, it's usually a physical state. In the beginning stages of a relationship, it's usually an emotional state that we are in love and we're head over heels and we are flushed with emotions and chemicals that are deviating from our standard, from our baseline. Then comes a stage of independence, usually towards a stage in a relationship where you've spent enough time together that you started to separate, you started to define your preferences and I like doing that and you don't like it, or I don't want to participate in that, but you do you, you just go out and be with yours and I'll go out and be with mine. And that's the stage when people might be building two separate businesses, or they might want to have a sense of self-fulfillment with their careers or friend groups or social circles or whatever reputation in life. And that becomes more important than the relationship itself. The relationship is still kind of ticking along, but we're not necessarily building the relationship, we're building ourselves.
Mm.
And hopefully at some point you would bring that back to nurture the relationship itself. But that's the phase actually where a lot of divorce are happening, because this is the stage when people grow apart. And the phase of interdependence would be the phase when you actually bring that together. And the two beings who have developed themselves separately and individually are now coming together and bringing all the good stuff back into the relationship so that they can bond over the things that they have in common, or that they can build new things that they would have in common. So interdependence is about the in-between space, is about the third entity, the relationship itself, when we are not enmeshed with each other, we're not separate from each other, but both and neither at the same time. We are relying on each other and we are existing as one organism. And at the same time, we have the agency and we have our own lives.
Mm. Yeah, and so counterdependent. What's that? What blew your mind about that?
That's the terrible twos. That's amazing. That's a phase and I'm very prone to it, when we would just say no for the sake of it. It's the
Mm.
stage where you establish your boundaries.
Yeah.
Stage when a baby just wants to say that I'm not going to do the things that you do or the way you do things because I need to find how I'm doing things. And it's a very unconscious or subconscious things in babies, but it can be you can play out that subconscious cycle as an adult as well, where we don't respect authority, We cannot hold down a job for the life of me. I could not stand office environments.
Oh,
No matter what, I'm
yeah,
just
terrible.
not suited for that.
I can't do it either. No, you're not alone.
Exactly. We are that type of people. We're that type of animals. It's just like we need something else. And I have that counter dependence in me where I hugely respect expertise and experience, but I have almost zero respect for job titles.
Mm,
Just because you're put in a box, I'm not going to bow down to that box. And it's just the thing in me that I don't regard authority as the be all end all. I'm
mm,
always looking for collaboration over the hierarchical thing.
yeah. No, it's fascinating, and you go into a lot of detail in all these different stages. I think if we were to talk about all the details of which you go into, we'd probably keep it here for ages. But of course, in a really good way. Um, but there's so many things about this. Frequently asked questions about yourself, the nervous system. Um, I'm curious to know how, if this is the right to ask, how do you protect your own mental health now? Like, as in, like, with all these lessons you've learned, like the boundaries, the four stages of relationship, how do you protect your own mental health now?
Mm. I understand a couple of things about myself that I didn't understand before.
Yeah,
I have the capacity to work fast and think fast and speak fast, but my personal pace is actually a lot slower.
yeah,
I need processing time. So it's very frequent with me after a job that for the next week, I'm not really able to do anything.
mm,
I'm definitely not creative, but I'm not very productive. And it's
mm,
not always because of tiredness or laziness. It's just the executive function tires out.
yeah,
And I'm exhausted by the amount of decisions that I had to make and by the amount of information that was flowing through me and by the amount of communications that I had to facilitate every single day. And I just come to a period of time when I need to radically slow down for my own nervous system to catch up and metabolize all the stuff that was happening. So that's one thing that I need a bit more time and space. Um, then I very much enjoy good people's company. So then I would, especially in between jobs, or if I have or when I have the time during a job as well, I make sure that I do have a life outside of the job and I spend some time with people who they might be from the industry, but we're definitely not doing something that is connected to the industry. I don't go out watch a film. We would
mm,
go out and go to a concert or go to a party or go have a coffee. Just do something that separates me from the bubble universe of this particular project because we
mm,
can get we can put our heads in the sand about it, that this is the only thing that exists, and the whole world just stops.
mm,
And I just like taking my hand out of the sand and just looking around a bit to feel that I'm a more complex person than the job itself. That's a huge thing for me.
mm,
And then the other one is I um I have a very interesting diet. I have a very particular I have a lot of sensitivities to food. So it's very important for me what I eat. And
mm,
there are a lot of substances and supplements that I can only order online. So it's like I almost like I travel with my stuff and I make sure, and it doesn't always come together, but I make sure as much as I can to be feeding myself all throughout the process with things that are actually giving me energy and not giving me spikes of a glucose spike
mm,
or, like a caffeine rush. But I'm trying to keep an equilibrium of natural energy so that I don't get absolutely exhausted and crashing at the end of the job and I don't get sick at the end of the job, which
mm,
usually happens to people.
mm. Yeah, because you talk a lot about how the work takes a lot out of your physical health as
Mm,
well,
mm,
and you don't realize it, and burnout is very real as well.
mm.
It's very,
Yeah,
very real.
yeah,
You sometimes your body just goes, nah, nah,
yeah,
we're not doing this today.
yeah, yeah,
You're saying your mind goes, yeah, but we've got to go to set today. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. We've got to
yeah,
go out today. Our body goes, nah, we need to
yeah.
recharge. And I don't mean that in to say that anyone's like depressed or nothing, but it's to say like, sometimes your energy just runs out. Sometimes you're doing too much and your body says, we just need to recharge now. And it's okay to do that. It's completely okay to do that. Nothing to be embarrassed about at all. Sometimes you just need a break more than anything. And yeah, especially if you're like in terms of the arts, if you're a dancer or you're working or you're in the West End doing 8 shows a week,
Yeah.
whether you're just character or like I don't know, like in the background somewhere, you're behind, you're in the background, or you're one of the supporting guys, or you're the lead guys. It takes its toll 8 shows a week. And it's important just to look after yourself in that. I just got a few more questions there for you, Alex. So is there anything that, we've talked a lot today about, your work and everything, and there's lots to it, and I encourage everyone to go check out Alex's Patreon and her Instagram page and her videos. They're all there for you to see. Do you think, is there anything that you feel isn't being talked about enough, like mental health or in the arts, or both?
Mm, interesting. So I'm not sure whether it's a question of talking. I think it's more of a matter of training
Hmm.
that I because we pay a lot of lip service to well-being on set, but the practice of it is so far from the idealistic guidelines that it's staggering. So I've been on a couple of sets by now where mental health and well-being and being trauma informed and being equal and diverse is on paper or even sustainable. On paper, it's part of the production ethos.
Mm,
And when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day, it goes out the window or it swings to the other end where it actually becomes quite contentious or quite abusive.
mm,
And I hardly ever had the good example, and they were all on sets where it wasn't part of the big narrative. It wasn't guidelines that we were following, and it wasn't a certificate that we wanted to get. And it was, it's not a badge of honor that we wear as we are that production. It
mm,
was just the people creating an environment that was actually more mindful and more wholesome than any other sets that I've been on. So that's the thing that I miss. It's not just the talking about it, but it's actually training people how to do that on the day when it's stressful and how to build that into a schedule and a budget and how to factor that in as a requirement. The same thing as you would have to pay for a medic.
mm.
Why don't we build in certain measurements where we just schedule in or budget in ways so that the set can actually feel more wholesome? That's what I still miss from the industry.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think and it's good that we can talk about this, and then more people become aware of it, and then we can make a difference.
Yeah.
Because the arts, I've said this in previous episodes, but we are important. We're more than just something. We're not just a hobby. We change things. We can have these conversations. We can put them in plays. We can make other characters say them. We can do this. We can do that. We can help change the world for the better. Alert people to what's going on, and there's much more to it than that. And your work, especially in all these areas, is really helping to really, you've informed me a lot actually about all this stuff and everything. I'm sure lots of more people will continue to hear your amazing stuff, and people from before are saying, see, she's got a very good point about a lot of good things. So thank you for all this work today, and for everything that you're doing. So just got two more questions for you, Alex. These are the closing questions for every guest, which is number one, what would you say was a bit of advice? I think this is quite fitting actually. What do you think was a bit yeah, what would you say is a bit of advice you wish you heard at the beginning of your career?
Find your own voice and bring your own personality into the work. Because before I did that, I was so nervous, and I just tried to do a good job, and I just tried to please people, or we don't get a handbook, especially in the film industry, we learn on the job. We don't really get told what we're supposed to be doing, or or we're not really getting a map for how life works. And it took me quite a long time to figure out who I am, and what I like and what I don't like, and what I want to say yes to and no to. And now that I am bringing more of my personality into my work life, I don't feel that separation and that psychological divide that I had before, that when I step on set, I'm a different person
Mm,
and do things for the job. And now I'm just like, I bring myself to work, and I enjoy working with people who resonate with that and vibe with that.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And finally, today, what would you say was an experience or experiences you've had in your career up to now that you'll never ever forget?
Ooh. Um, Quite a few. I want to pick something that is like ridiculously wholesome.
Hmm.
So we did a show where we were shooting for 3 months, and I think it was the very last weeks where we did a version of Secret Santa, that we all picked names and we prepped a little gift for each other. And it was all tied in with the theme of the show. And we did a little display, like a little exhibition of everyone's mutual gifts to each other.
Mm,
So it's all, I think you had to do a portrait. That was the thing. You had to do a portrait of the person that you picked. But obviously it was with different materials, and it was a huge art department. So they were like ridiculously creative. And even people not in the art department got so creative with even the building materials or the techniques or the view, how they looked at that person, that I was standing there at that exhibition and I'm like, this is how this environment and this feeling is how I want to feel on every set,
mm,
where we as human beings care about each other this much, that we started investigating about each other, and we try to find out stuff about the person so that we can have a portrait of them. And that group of people will never, ever come together like that, because
mm,
you will never be able to schedule the exact same people for a duration of time, not even for a rep party.
mm,
There's never a single time that this amalgamation of people will ever be together like this. And those little time stamps are just so precious. And I would love to bring that feeling to every set, that for a moment, we really did care about each other.
mm. Amen to that. Yeah, we'll continue these conversations and just
Yeah.
make things a lot better for everyone, and hopefully there'll come a day where we don't need to have these talks and everyone is up with it and
Yeah.
all together with it, and until then we push forward and keep doing it and make make people happy and know that
Yeah.
everyone has a worth, everyone has worth, and there is no need to look down on anyone. There's no need to do anything else. Just love each other and respect each other for everything that they do. And and you're a pioneer in that movement, Alex. And it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Cool. If you just hang on, we'll have a little debrief afterwards after I finish the recording. But first of all, thank you so much for your time today. I've really loved talking to you. And thank you to you guys as well for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been the Uncensored Critic podcast, and I'll be back very, very soon. And wow, so much stuff to talk about going forward. But yeah, Alex Mills, thank you so much.
Thank you.